All right, so someone dropped this comment on my last video. You're overgeneralizing. You will have a different outlook once you find a better company. Your current company sucks and the people it hires are incompetent. Well, this is the best job I've ever had. This is one of my first non minimum wage jobs that I've had in my entire life. So I don't have anything to compare it to. I've spent myself, I spent my whole life frustrated in jobs that didn't offer any benefits, that were hourly, and you had as much job security as your next dump. That's how I see myself in the workplace. If you think they're not going to flush the toilet on you just because you're special and you're going to go to a different evil corp that thinks that you're special, you're not special. No one is special when it comes to the way that people are frustrated in our society. There are going to be more general strikes. There are going to be discontent. There's going to be people in the streets asking themselves, how long can we work like this for practically nothing? As I've said before, this is my poorest Christmas of my entire life, and I've worked really hard over the past couple of years. I've had to move my entire office 4 times, reset up 4 times. I've had Gen Z worker after Gen Z worker after Gen Z worker that all are the same person wearing the same haircut, same attitude towards work. The corporation doesn't want to spend more money, so they're doing a minimum wage plus with that job. And every time I complain about Gen Z not doing their job, they just kind of look at you like, well, that's your problem. You're the boss of Gen Z, so you've got to tell them what to do. And I'm like, he's not going to listen to me. I don't have manager in my title, and therefore I don't have the necessary um, authority to discipline him. Because if it were up to me, I wouldn't have hired these people. Like I would have been in the job interview, and I just would have been like, okay, tell me about what you can do. And if you're sitting in a job interview and they tell you they don't know how to do the job, but they're cheap enough, all you do is you just grind through them. Their next one's going to show up just as lost as the last one. They're going to wonder why they can't afford to pay their bills with minimum wage, and they're going to develop that attitude. I've seen that attitude on many occasions. That attitude, that entitled, I want enough money to survive on. Well, let's uh let's remind you, Gen Z, everyone wants enough money so that they're not constantly having to look for another way of making money. I mean, today I had to make a Cash App thing, and I've never had a Cash App thing. I've heard of it, but I never needed one for anything. And so suddenly I'm doing things that I don't want to do. I mean, if I had the money to be comfortable, do you think I'd be out here doing this? This is what I have to do to earn extra money, because having one job doesn't guarantee that you'll make enough money in order to be able to survive. So when people say you need to find a better company, it's the equivalent of telling you to start your own business when you don't know anything about making money or what you would do. Most of us are better workers. In fact, the 99.9% of the proletariat is a better worker than a business owner. Let's just put it out there. The proletariat isn't good at business, because if the proletariat was good at business, why would they work for other people? Why would the bulk of the population of workers be working for other people inside of grocery stores or department stores? In fact, yesterday, while I was watching a video about a guy walking through a mall that had maybe 10 to 15% of the stores that were left in that particular mall, it reminded me a lot of Fiesta Mall, which is a giant parking lot now. And that's what's happening to the proletariat. The proletariat is being bulldozed just like the malls. Once a haven for customers, right? That's where you went when I was a kid. You go to the mall, you go to the food court, you go to the arcade, you get yourself some Air Jordans. I mean, that's what you did as a kid. Now, just like with jobs, when I saw that guy walking through that building, and that looked, again, on the outside, it reminded me a lot of Fiesta Mall, but on the inside, it reminded me of the Chandler Mall. The exact same layout of the escalators, of where they put everything, because everything is strategically placed inside of a mall. Just like in our society, there are jobs that are placed there that are going to make you comfortable. And then there's all of those people that aren't working in that mall anymore. Every single one of those $1 million businesses inside of that mall at some point was making money, because that's what businesses do. You either make money with the proletariat, right? Because you're not going to make the kind of profits that Walmart wants to make by having comfortable wages. By having limited wages is what you're saying to every one of those people that worked in that mall for all of those years, generation after generation of young people that worked in that mall, is that you're going to have to go find something else. And as there are less and less jobs in our society that are suitable for people, and suitable is a very inaccurate word there, that are available, then these people are going to have to find other ways of making a living. Just because you don't want to eat, just because you don't want to pay rent, and you don't want to make car payments, and you don't want to give all of your money away to all of these monopoly companies, doesn't mean you don't have to. Every every corporation in America wants to pay its workers as little as humanly possible and reap the reward of billions of dollars worth of revenue every single year. So the proletariat's not designed so much to be comfortable as it is, in every sense of the word, to be uncomfortable in a low paying job that is monotonous, that has no job security, and your boss doesn't care if you don't show up to work tomorrow. If Gen Z doesn't show up to work tomorrow, are we really losing any major talent? Are we losing anything of value? Of course not. He's just a temp. Every person who is currently making a sub $20 an hour wage is a temp. And the second that you get hurt and you can't do your job as efficiently as you were before you got hurt, you are going to be taken out to the glue truck. You are the derby horse of the workforce. The second you can't run, they're going to look at you and like, we got to put this one down. And they don't do it that that way, right? Putting you down in the proletariat means you become homeless. That's the true fear in America. Because everywhere we go, you're going to see homeless people. I passed as I drove to the park. If you guys saw me in the park, I sat down and guess what? Within seconds, I was approached by a homeless person. That's what happens to people who can't function in the system. There is no social safety net that's going to protect you from becoming homeless. And so many of us are one paycheck away from becoming homeless. And this whole narrative that when you take a job, that you're joining a family is completely ridiculous, because perpetuating complacency in a system designed to extract as much possible from the workforce while giving back as little as necessary to keep it running. So the fear aspect in our current society is all of these videos that got recommended to me today on YouTube for what that looks like. People can't afford to pay their rent. Evictions are sky high right now because the wages and inflation are cutting your income to nothing. My buying power from my current job has practically no buying power whatsoever. That's why I'm in this situation. My bills aren't that unattainable. In fact, when I think about before I started this job, the rent was eating up over 85% of my monthly income. And I didn't know what to do about that. You can't just, again, as I said, you can't just decide what you're going to pay the landlord. And the landlord will tell you, he doesn't care whether or not you can afford it. This is his business. He invested his money into buying this property, and he wants that money out of your rear end every single month. And that's with every other corporation in America. And sadly, we work for the same places that don't want to give us any money. And that's the sad truth. They don't want you to have money because they want to keep it all at the top. And when you live in such a sick society, a system that doesn't want you to get ahead, because most people are not going to be able to work for a better company. The idea of us finding this better company is unrealistic. And today, of course, I was looking at CNN Business, and one of the strategically placed articles inside of here, right? I'm looking at CNN Business right now. And I was scrolling through here, and it's talking about thousands of Amazon drivers have gone on strike. But really, what struck me is not Party City is going out of business, Big Lots is going out of business, Starbucks union goes on strike. You know what really struck me? Is this article right here, that you guys, I will put up on the screen. No, I'm not. I'm too lazy for that. A year in countdown as Mega Millions jackpot grows to nearly $1 billion. Oh, love the name of the author of this article, Artemis. Now, what value does this have? I'm still kind of like taken aback by it. Like, what? Who cares? Mega Million jackpot grows to nearly $1 billion. That's not business news. But guess what? For a lot of people out there, this jackpot reaching $1 billion is their only hope of a successful future. And the reason why they paid CNN in order to be here is this is advertisement. Not everything is a click on the side here advertisement. There's another story here that clearly shows that it's an advertisement. Chili's is now America's hottest restaurant. Is that really news that belongs in the business section of CNN? No. But when you're bleeding out money like CNN is doing and trying to avoid becoming a casualty of an era that doesn't need CNN anymore, these people know that they're not all going to have jobs. When the dust clears at CNN, it's going to either not exist, or a lot of the people that we've gotten used to seeing over the years aren't going to be there anymore. There's already so many people that have quit the news because they've had to. They had no choice but to leave an industry. It's like newspapers, a perfect example. The newspapers used to hire young reporters who would go out and report the news. Well, as society moves on, the newspaper jobs get left behind. And that's what's happening to a lot of the jobs that would normally, again, coming back to the mall example, those jobs are jobs that are no longer necessary in our society, just like malls. And you guys all saw that article a few weeks ago where malls are trying to be repurposed as tiny apartments inside of a mall. Can you imagine? You're so broke that the only job that you, or excuse me, the only job that you could get is inside the food court while you walk to work from the food court because you're living in a tiny house inside of the mall. How a room that used to be a storefront. That's how broke America's going. And there's no turning back. There's no turning to the side. There's no getting out of the way. This is the America that we're living, and we have to figure it out. So I put this stuff into the comment into Chat GPT and generated this script. Let's see how much of that I can get through in 5 minutes. You've heard it before, right? Find a company that values you. Work for a place that treats you like family. Sound good? Does it? Like maybe, just maybe, you'll find that dream job, the one where you finally feel safe. But let me tell you a secret. There's no such thing as a place to feel safe. Unless you're the owner, you come from a wealthy family, or you win that $1 billion jackpot, you are never going to feel safe. There's a feeling I have in my stomach every morning when I wake up and I have to go to Evil Corp. And it's that sensation that today could be my last day. Because it's not like it's a far fetched idea. I see it every single day. People who show up at work and then they get that phone call from HR that says, hey, we're letting you go. This is your exit interview. You have a few minutes to collect your things. And that's a good way of being terminated. The bad way of being terminated, the way that I got terminated at the call center, is they call you into a little room and they tell you that they need to talk to you. They have HR on speakerphone, and while you're in that little room, while they explain to you what's happening to you, there's someone else in the background filling up a box with your personal belongings at your desk. And that box is sitting for you at the front of the company, and a security guard gets to escort you out into the parking lot and make certain that you leave. Because sometimes when people get fired, it's so unexpected to them because we're so used to going to the same place. We're very much so creatures of habit that we're very used to doing the exact same thing. When I drive to work, it's the exact same route every single day. When I ride my bike, I've had people like all over who are like, oh, he's about to turn on that street, when I would used to film my bike rides when I didn't have a car to work. So I would just film it with my GoPro every day. And it's the same route for months. And sometimes people do these things for 20 or 30 years. We live in the time where even 20 years of service to an evil corporation isn't going to save you from being terminated. If it comes down to it, if they can automate your job or they can find some Gen Zero to do your job, you're going to be out of work. There is no loyalty, and it hasn't been for a long time. We don't live in the time of pensions or going to one job. The second the algorithm detects that you're a low job performer, they're going to find a way of making certain that you're not there tomorrow. And some corporations are nicer about it, others are not. Like the people who I've seen terminated in the last month or so didn't get a behavior adjustment program or a correction plan for making certain that you're doing your job the way that they want. It's simply, hey, we don't need you anymore. Goodbye. A lot of the people that get canned this way are salespeople because they have a a strike system, right? You get 5 strikes before you get fired, and you also have to keep your stats, your sales performance within the margins on your dashboard, right? And they create these very elaborate dashes for these salespeople, right? It shows you when you're in the red, it shows you when you're in the green, it shows you what you're making on commission, it shows you how many strikes you have left before you get fired. So most companies put you on a 5 strike rule, and there's very limited time off, especially paid time off. I've heard of HR calling people and telling them that even when their own family was on the verge of kicking the bucket, either you come back to work by tomorrow, regardless of what's going on in your personal life, or you will be terminated. In fact, some of the rehires, this is how vicious this rule is, and how they don't even take into consideration that we're all human beings that need food, water, and shelter. And I will add, as I said in the live stream today, love of some kind. But they'll fire that person based on a system that's very rigid. And once that person's done dealing with their family problems, they hire them back because either they're very skilled at doing what they're doing or they realize that a rigid system doesn't work for all human beings. These point systems, these terminations sometimes are very cruel. In fact, when I first started working for this company, they did a massive reduction in workforce, right? That means you show up to work, HR's already planned out who's not going to be there at the end of the day. Typically done on a Friday, but with this company, they fire people whenever. It doesn't matter. In fact, when I was talking to the head of sales, she's just like, the second we have to start dealing with behavioral problems, they're gone. But in that situation, and I keep using the word situation, I don't know why, it just seems to be stuck in my brain. But they fired all of these people. And when they realized that they couldn't run the company with someone cheaper, because someone cheaper wouldn't apply for that position, right? I mean, my current job is a very, very low paying, low skill, entry level job. The corporation thinks that anyone can do it. And that's how they feel even about positions where people have been there for 5 to 10 years. We'll just find someone that doesn't cost as much as that person. We'll lay that person off and then we'll just hire this person under a different job description. But guess what? What happens when the corporation can't find someone that will work for minimum wage? Well, this is what happened to my senior manager when that event happened. The executives called him, told him to reach out to that person on their personal number and ask them if they would come back for the exact same amount of money that they got fired making. There was no increase in pay. There was no nothing. It's like, oh, by the way, we made a mistake firing you. Will you come back for $16 an hour? Most people will say no, but it all depends. I know one person from that event, which stands out in my head because I'd only been on the job for a week before that happens. And she's a person that, I mean, she just didn't know what was going to happen. And so a couple months went by and I saw her again in the office. It's like, I thought they fired you. And she's like, they did, but they just hired me over here. And I was just like, are they paying you more? And she's like, nope, they're actually paying me less. And I just kind of like looked at her. It's like, they fired you and hired you for less money, but you're so desperate for a job that you couldn't say no. You had to take it. The saying no to a paycheck wasn't even a possibility. Again, what makes this person so desperate? Single, mom, kids. That's what they really really like people that have obligations. That's something that all of my Gen Zs don't have. When my Gen Z workers show up and I realize that they're living at home or they're in a financial situation where every month, at the end of the month, they can't afford to pay their bills. Like my current Gen Z is $500 in the hole every single month because his rent is the same as mine, but he makes less than half of what I make. And so he has to figure out what he's going to do every month. And I was telling one of my coworkers this that makes the same amount that I do. It's like, I don't understand how these people keep going like this. You can't keep going into the hole for a job that you could lose tomorrow. And he said to me something very pointed, and I'll never forget this. And he said to me, don't you think his family knows at his age that they're going to have to support him for the rest of their life? Their natural life. They know their child isn't going to be able to make a living. They've finished their education. They're out in the workforce. Parents know that the opportunities for their children in the workforce aren't there. Every parent knows that. It's every parent's greatest fear that their child will never make a living income. And that's why so many parents would rather have them move back into their houses rather than supporting them for the rest of their lives in their own apartments. Because unless that parent is very wealthy, you can't afford to support another person fully, because that's not the way the system was intended. Every person is supposed to be able to get enough employment, and by enough employment I mean enough money every month in order to support themselves. But there are a lot of people who find themselves in dire straits, like myself. No matter what we do for work, there's not going to be a company that's going to pay us sufficient for us to be able to make it. So I used to believe it too. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I showed up early and stayed late, they'd notice me, they'd care, they'd value me. But here's what they don't tell you: unicorn companies don't exist, and even if they did, they'd never hire someone like me. You know what else they do notice? If you're young enough to work overtime without complaining, if you're desperate enough to accept low pay with no benefits, if you're too scared to fight back when they start piling on more and more work, they notice how much they can take from you before you break. They'll call you family until the profits dip or the machines get smarter, then suddenly you're disposable. You're just another number on a spreadsheet. And they'll smile as they hand you your last paycheck, reminding you of all the opportunities they gave you. The truth is, these companies don't want you to thrive. They want you just comfortable enough to keep coming back. And if you think I'm exaggerating, ask yourself this: why do so many people live paycheck to paycheck, even with good jobs? Why are we one injury or one layoff away from losing everything? Again, that's my personal situation. Even with good jobs, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. There's nothing fancy about my life. I don't drive a fancy car. I don't live in a fancy house. I don't have any furniture. If you look in my fridge, there's absolutely nothing to eat in there except maybe some carrot sticks that I got last week. There's nothing in there. And that's not just because I'm worried about the roaches eating my food. It's just you don't have it. Even with the good job, you don't have it. Because they don't care, they never did. They sell us a dream to keep us quiet, to keep us hoping while they take in billions. So if you're waiting for that unicorn company to save you, stop. They don't exist. But here's what does: your skills, your voice, and if enough of us stop believing the the pipe dream that they sell us, maybe we can build something better. And this pipe dream, I've heard it my entire life, and the one that's the most outrageous, the one that blew my socks off, was when I was working in that call center and my supervisor comes up to me with all of the honesty in the world. He truly believed this, right? This was a $15 an hour job, and he says to me, Millennial Steve, now that you work at this call center and you make this much money, you can think about starting a family. And I just looked at him like, are you kidding me? And I knew that from that moment on, he realized that, you can't keep feeding me lies like these kids fresh out of high school or community college. I don't believe that. And I know you don't believe that. But you've said it so many times that you've convinced yourself that $15 is family wages. But the reality is $15 is starvation wages. Nearly every place in America that you would want to live. Sure, there are plenty of places in tiny America out there where people still pay $500 for monthly rent. But if you're living here in Arizona, where the average monthly rent is probably increased since the last time I saw a stat on it, which is probably closer to $2,000 a month for rent, $15 an hour means you're going to need 3 full-time jobs in order to get to a place in which you're financially comfortable and the rest of your life, absolute miserable hellscape of a life. Can you imagine having to work 3 full-time jobs to get to an hourly rate where you can finally afford to pay your bills? And you could have that many jobs and still be uninsured, still have no medical insurance. Because I've been there before. I've worked tons of jobs, nearly every job. I think this is the only job where I've had halfway decent health insurance. The rest of them either didn't provide it or the premiums were so high that you couldn't afford to participate in it. I'm going to leave this there. I know this is an extra long video, but I had a lot to say. I spent about 4 hours making content today. So if you don't think this is a full-time job for me, think again. Not only did I spend 4 hours talking on the internet today, but I have to be able to do this and hold a coherent thought throughout the entire time. If you don't think this is work, try this. Try putting together this many hours of content in one day and tell me that's not a job.